Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Holy bombshell. Now I have to add a disclaimer before we get into the topic of this video. This leaked image that we're going to talk about today is actually not new. I believe this is from back in July, but it seems as though I and many others completely missed it. I try to stay on top of all these things, especially big stories like this, but sometimes I guess things just fly under the radar, and this little story certainly seemed like it did that. And so even though we're however many months late, I gotta try to help rectify that. We have a leaked photo that seemingly nobody really talked about, which honestly is one of the most blatant examples of state-run media collusion we've ever seen. The DNC literally handed talking points to the mainstream media, instructing them on exactly how to spin Kamala Harris's disastrous handling of the border. Apparently, the DNC sent this little pamphlet, like the same kind of pamphlets with all the talking points that they were handing to Joe Biden before his press conferences. And on this pamphlet, you see all the talking points on how they were going to spin this thing, similar to the Hunter Biden laptop story, how they needed to spin the story in order to push back against the Trump campaign. And that's, of course, a quote from that leaked email that we've mentioned many times. But anyways, the talking points were delivered, and then nearly every single mainstream media outlet just parroted those lines word for word, as if they're not even pretending to be independent anymore. Let me show you guys exactly what happened. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. Okay, so very quickly, let's break this down. After Biden slowly shuffled out of the spotlight in 2024, Kamala Harris became the de facto face of the administration, and despite being one of the most unpopular politicians in modern history, she was handed the nomination. But obviously, Kamala Harris had a problem. First off, she's totally unlikable, and secondly, a couple years prior at the start of the Biden administration, she was publicly humiliated by her utter incompetence at handling the border crisis. And of course, it completely tanked her image. She then very quickly became the least popular vice president on record in American history. Then, of course, after that public humiliation, Kamala Harris basically never showed her face ever again. She was sent to the basement, strategically being hidden for the rest of the Biden admin. So basically, following her failures, people were questioning her ability to lead. And then obviously, the DNC had to do something about it. They needed to flip the script, and so what did they do? Well, they wrote a brand new script. Look at this little talking point pamphlet. Again, exactly the same type of thing that we saw in Joe Biden's hand during the rare times that he would actually address the press. It reads, Vice President Kamala Harris was never appointed border czar. There has never been such a position. It does not exist. The border czar title was invented by Republicans and the press simply repeated it. She was not asked to lead on the admin's immigration or border enforcement policies. POTUS tasked her to lead admin's diplomatic root causes strategies in Central America, not border policy. She was tasked with addressing push factors driving migrants to flee these countries, secure private sector investment, promoting democracy, economic opportunity, $5 billion in private sector investments, role focus on changing conditions in other countries, not U.S. border crossings by migrants in Guatemala, Honduras, El Salvador, the countries in Vice President Harris's root causes portfolio have decreased dramatically in recent years. In 2023, they made up 22% of all border crossings, down from 41% in 2021. What a ridiculous semantics argument. This was the defense that the Democrats were putting up, which obviously has so many holes in it. And if we had a legitimate, neutral, free press that did its job, they'd probably push back on a lot of these talking points. But what do you think they actually did? What do you think actually happened? Yeah, the media just went full-on Orwellian, dystopian novel mode. Nearly every single mainstream media outlet just repeating the exact same talking points. Not pushing back, not presenting it as this is what the Democrats are defending her with. No, just straight up reciting the exact scripted propaganda verbatim.
She was never actually border czar.
Border czar, which was not something that was formally conveyed upon her.
She's been labeled incorrectly by some members of the right as the border czar.
Republicans named her the border czar.
Republicans have always exaggerated what her job was at the border.
Republicans, again, have labeled her the border czar.
But that's not exactly what President Biden asked her to do.
She was never put in charge of the border.
That wasn't actually her task.
Not to secure it, but to address the underlying roots of migration.
She was charged with leading the administration's efforts to address the root causes of migration.
The root causes of migration to the U.S.
The root causes.
Root causes.
Root causes.
The root causes.
Root causes
of immigration.
We also want to point out that right now apprehension numbers continue to decrease in our country, especially over the last few months.
And I just want to note that border crossings have been going down.
And illegal border crossings are lower right now.
Migrant crossings
crossings continue to drop.
Border crossings are way down.
Border crossings are down.
Different networks, same exact words. Remind you of something?
Controlling exactly what people think, and this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Yeah, again, instead of acting like journalists, they were acting like White House spokespeople, just reading the government press release. This is not journalism. This is state-controlled media. Except instead of a dictator issuing orders to the media, it's the Democrat National Committee and their billionaire donors. And obviously, as we've been covering for years on this channel, this isn't an isolated incident. We've seen this countless of times before. My favorite example is when CBS ran a fact check on the Hunter Biden laptop story in 2020, calling it Russian disinformation, only to admit 2 years later that it was completely real. And of course, we all remember that 60 Minutes clip where Donald Trump was fact-checked on air, supposedly pushing an untrue story related to the Hunter Biden laptop. Leslie Stahl, again acting like a journalist, went on the record saying, well, that's not true when Donald Trump mentioned it. And so we're seeing the same thing over and over again with these media outlets like CBS that are being completely exposed for what they really are. Simply an arm, an extension of the DNC. And it's not like we have to go that far back. We don't have to go back to the 2020 election to find clear-cut examples of this. Just go back a couple months ago with that pathetic CBS 60 Minutes fake news Kamala Harris interview where they basically babied her, gave her softball questions, and orchestrated what appeared to be an interview, but really it was totally edited. And now look at CBS pushing one-sided narratives on USAID whistleblowers, trying to portray Donald Trump's investigation into their corruption as some sort of authoritarian overreach, constitutional crisis. It's all one giant operation, a rigged system where if the deep state's preferred candidate has been installed in the office, the media doesn't report on the government. No, they actively work for it. That's why these major media outlets covered up the Twitter files. That's why they dismissed the Hunter Biden bribery scandal, because they had an election to win for their preferred candidate. It's never been about the truth, it's always about protecting the regime. And that's why Trump labeled them fake news and he's been fighting with them, because he's had enough. That's why he recently banned the Associated Press from the press room, because these people are not reporters, they're DNC activists with press badges. And of course they then play victim, they whine about press freedom, but what they really want is total narrative control. And they're doing the same thing now in response to Donald Trump kicking the AP out. Jim Acosta is actually begging his colleagues in the mainstream media to stop covering Trump in protest. The guy's calling for a media blackout on covering the President of the United States. These people are deranged. They think they're the gatekeepers of information, or at least they still think that they're the gatekeepers of information, because at one point they really were. But here's the truth, little Jimmy Acosta boy. Nobody cares. If CNN, CBS, MSNBC, and their dying dinosaur networks refuse to cover Donald Trump, frankly, if they just poof, cease to exist, that void would be filled instantly, especially in today's day and age, considering all the independent media that we have. The era of total media control is over. They've spent years using their monopoly on information to gaslight the public, but now, to use their own words against them, the walls are closing in.
The walls closing in.
All the walls closing in.
The walls closing in.
They've been so utterly exposed, their credibility is gone, and nobody believes them anymore. I mean, what an absolute farce. We're independent, neutral media. They have the audacity to say that while they're being handed DNC talking points that they push without question or without pushback. What a complete joke. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys on this one. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.